Why did so many flamethrower teams die on Iwo Jima? You've heard the viral claim, 94% never made it home. But what really happened on those black volcanic sands in early 1945, where Marines armed with 70-pound M2 flamethrowers fought through tunnels and pillboxes, facing Japanese orders to kill the man with the flame first? The official records tell a story far more complex, and just as tragic. The truth behind the casualty rates, the survival odds, and the myth that swept across history is still debated. What's fact, what's legend, and why did these men become the most exposed soldiers on the island? Let's unravel the real story behind why so many flamethrower teams died on Iwo Jima. Iwo Jima sits alone in the Pacific, a tiny island just 8 square miles in size. Its surface is black volcanic ash, soft enough to swallow boots and stall tanks, but so fine that shovels can't build real cover. The southern tip rises sharply into Mount Suribachi, a 554-foot cone that dominates the landscape. From its slopes you can see nearly every inch of the island, a natural fortress perfectly positioned for artillery spotters and machine gun nests. When American planners looked at Iwo Jima, they saw a stepping stone for bombers, an airstrip within reach of mainland Japan. But General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, the man in charge of the island's defense, saw something else. He understood that the ground itself could be a weapon. Instead of defending the beaches in force, as on earlier Pacific islands, he ordered his men to dig in deep. He wanted to turn every yard of sand into a trap. Kuribayashi's strategy was simple in theory, brutal in practice. He ordered his troops to hold the high ground, build strong points into the volcanic slopes, and connect them with tunnels running beneath the surface. He banned the traditional banzai charges, knowing they would only waste lives. Instead, his plan was to let the Americans land, then bleed them dry as they fought for every foot of ground. The result was a battlefield where the Marines faced not just enemy soldiers, but the island itself. Vehicles bogged down in the ash. Infantrymen struggled to dig foxholes that collapsed as quickly as they were made. Every advance uphill brought them closer to Suribachi's watchful guns. Nowhere was safe from observation, and nowhere offered easy shelter. From the start, the black sand and the looming volcano shaped every decision. Kuribayashi's vision turned Iwo Jima into a maze of killing zones, forcing attackers to fight on ground chosen by the defenders. For the men assigned to breach the Japanese lines, especially those carrying the heaviest weapons, this meant a fight not just against an enemy, but against a landscape designed to destroy them. 11 miles of tunnels lay hidden beneath Iwo Jima's surface. Dug through volcanic rock, these passages connected hundreds of bunkers, pillboxes, and artillery nests in a single, sprawling network. This underground grid allowed Japanese defenders to move unseen from one strong point to the next, reinforcing threatened sectors or launching sudden counterattacks without ever exposing themselves to American fire. Each entrance and firing port was carefully camouflaged, sometimes no bigger than a mailbox slot, making it nearly impossible for attackers to spot the source of incoming bullets or grenades until it was too late. Above ground, the terrain was crisscrossed with mutually supporting fields of fire. Every pillbox was positioned to cover its neighbors, with overlapping arcs that left no approach unguarded. If Marines tried to flank a bunker, they would find themselves swept by machine gun fire from another angle. Artillery pieces and mortars, hidden in deep emplacements or even inside the mountain itself, could reach nearly any point on the island. Kuribayashi's engineers had pre-sighted every likely avenue of attack, zeroing in mortars and heavy guns on the beaches and the open ground beyond. As a result, the first wave of American artillery and airstrikes did little to reduce the enemy's actual fighting strength. The real garrison waited below, shielded by tons of earth and concrete. This defensive system meant that even the heaviest bombardments left most bunkers and tunnels intact. The only way to neutralize a fortified position was to get close, sometimes within yards, and force the defenders out or destroy them inside. Standard infantry weapons couldn't reach through yards of reinforced concrete or blast through buried steel doors. Grenades, satchel charges, and flamethrowers became essential tools, but using them meant crossing open ground under fire from multiple directions. Each attack required not just firepower, but also extraordinary coordination and courage. For the Marines, the challenge of Iwo Jima was not just the number of enemy soldiers, but the fact that every position was part of a larger living machine, one designed to kill anyone who tried to break its grip. The tunnel network and interlocked kill zones made old tactics obsolete. Overcoming them would demand new methods, new weapons, and a willingness to fight at point-blank range. This is where the story of the flamethrower teams truly begins. Assaulting a Japanese bunker on Iwo Jima was a carefully choreographed sequence, but one that often fell apart under fire. The typical Marine assault team started with a core of combat engineers, 1 or 2 flamethrower operators, a demolitions man with satchel charges, and several riflemen or BR gunners assigned to provide covering fire. Each member had a defined role, but survival depended on how well they could adapt in the chaos of battle. The first step was suppression. Riflemen and light machine guns pinned down defenders by firing into every visible port and suspected firing slit. Sometimes, smoke grenades were thrown to obscure the approach, but the wind and terrain often limited their effect. The team moved forward in short, bounding rushes, using shell holes or the lee of terrain for what little cover the black sand allowed. Every movement was exposed to crossfire from unseen pillboxes or snipers concealed in the rubble. Once within range, often no more than 30 or 40 yards, the flamethrower operator advanced, carrying a 70-pound M2 unit on his back. The weapon's effective range was short, and its fuel lasted only seconds. Riflemen tried to draw fire away, but the operator was still the most visible and vulnerable man on the team. As he closed in, the roar of the pressurized fuel and the arc of flame made him an instant target for every enemy gun in sight. The operator aimed a burst of flame through a firing port or vent, hoping to force the defenders to abandon their position, or at least keep their heads down. If the defenders didn't flee, the demolitions man followed behind, carrying a satchel charge or bundle of explosives. He sprinted to the bunker's entrance or firing port, shoved the charge inside, and pulled back as far as he could before detonation. Timing was critical. Too soon, and the defenders might throw the charge back. Too late, and the team could be caught in the blast. Teamwork and coordination were essential, but confusion and casualties often forced ad hoc adjustments, with riflemen stepping in to carry charges or operate the flamethrower if the original operator was hit. After each assault, the team withdrew to cover, sometimes under renewed fire from adjacent bunkers or from Japanese troops emerging through hidden tunnel exits. Operators who expended their fuel had to retreat for a dangerous refilling process, while the rest of the squad regrouped and prepared to repeat the sequence. This cycle, suppress, advance, flame, demolish, withdraw, played out again and again across the island, each time at close range and under the constant threat of sudden, concentrated enemy fire. The process was methodical, but the risk was ever present, and even the smallest misstep could prove fatal. Carrying an M2 flamethrower on Iwo Jima meant hauling a 70-pound pack across open ground, often while sprinting or crawling under fire. The weight alone was punishing, especially after hours of combat in loose volcanic ash that clung to boots and uniforms. Operators had to balance the fuel tanks, a pressurized nitrogen cylinder, and the wand-like projector, all strapped to their backs and arms. The M2's effective range was about 20 to 40 yards, barely half the length of a football field, and far less if wind or terrain worked against the operator. Getting close enough to use it meant crossing ground already swept by machine guns and mortars, with almost no cover. Visibility was both a blessing and a curse. The M2's stream of burning fuel was impossible to miss, a bright, roaring arc that lit up the battlefield and drew immediate attention. The noise of ignition, a deep hiss and sudden whoosh, gave away the operator's position before the flame even reached its target. Japanese defenders learned to listen for that sound, and often fired at the first sign of a pressure burst. Even when operators managed to fire a burst into a bunker port, the weapon's fuel lasted only about 7 to 10 seconds in total, divided into a handful of short spurts. Each attack was over almost as soon as it began. After every assault, the operator faced another challenge: refueling. The process required retreating to a supply point, typically dug into the rear slope of a hill or behind a knocked-out vehicle. Refilling the tanks was not just slow, it was dangerous. Fuel and pressurized gas had to be handled in the open, sometimes under indirect fire, and the operator was left exposed and exhausted. Teams rotated operators as quickly as possible, but fatigue built up after each cycle. Some men went through multiple tanks in a single day, each run increasing their risk. The design of the M2 made stealth impossible. The tanks stuck out above the operator's shoulders, reflecting sunlight and catching the eye of any observer. The fuel mixture, usually a blend of gasoline and a thickening agent, was sticky and flammable, raising the stakes if a bullet or piece of shrapnel hit the pack. Even a glancing shot could rupture a tank, turning the operator into a walking hazard. There was no armor to protect the fuel, only the hope that riflemen and machine gunners could keep enemy heads down long enough for a single, decisive burst. Every limitation of the M2, its weight, short range, brief firing time, and unavoidable visibility, increased the danger for the man carrying it. These constraints shaped not just tactics, but survival itself. Operators were forced to expose themselves again and again, knowing that each approach might be their last. Official records from the Battle of Iwo Jima show that flamethrower and demolition teams suffered some of the highest casualty rates among all marine assault specialties. After-action reports and chemical warfare service summaries, while incomplete, consistently point to a grim pattern. Casualty rates for these teams often ranged from 70 to over 90% during the worst phases of the fighting. In some battalions, fewer than 1 in 5 flamethrower operators remained fit for action by the end of a major assault. These numbers represent both those killed and wounded. Military definitions of casualty include anyone taken out of the fight, not just those who died. Unit-level data, though scattered, reinforce this picture. For example, in the 21st Marines, daily rosters tracked 9 to 12 flamethrower operators per battalion at the start of the campaign. By the end of intense days, 7 or more might be listed as wounded or killed, with replacements drawn from rifle companies to fill the gaps. Chemical warfare service analysts reviewing Pacific campaigns noted that, on Iwo Jima, the average loss for frontline flamethrower teams hovered around 80%, with some companies experiencing even higher rates in the first week. Despite the lack of a single, consolidated casualty roll, the available evidence leaves little doubt. The odds of surviving multiple bunker assaults as a flamethrower operator were bleak. While the viral 94% died figure lacks support in primary documents, the true casualty rates, when measured by those wounded and killed, remained among the highest for any role in the Marine assault forces. These numbers set the factual baseline for understanding both the danger and the myth that followed. The story of the 94% died statistic begins not in wartime records, but decades later, on the internet. Early Marine Corps histories and memoirs from Iwo Jima mention the dangers of flamethrower duty, but none assign a number to the odds of survival. No official after-action report, casualty roll, or published roster from 1945 lists a figure like 94%, or claims that only 18 operators survived the campaign. Instead, these documents describe high losses in general terms, noting frequent casualties but stopping short of precise percentages. The first appearance of the 94% claim traces to online videos and blog posts in the 2020s. YouTube documentaries began repeating, without citation, that out of 335 or 380 flamethrower operators on Iwo Jima, only 18 left the island alive. These numbers quickly spread across history forums and social media, often copied word for word. Blogs and comment threads referenced each other or linked back to the same handful of viral videos, creating a closed loop where the claim seemed to gain authority simply by repetition. A closer look reveals the roots of confusion. The military term casualty includes both wounded and killed, but online retellings often treat all casualties as deaths. In some cases, the loss rate from a single company or the worst day of fighting is presented as if it applied to every operator during the entire battle. Other times, casualty data from the Pacific theater as a whole is compressed into a single statistic for Iwo Jima. As the story bounced from one platform to the next, distinctions between killed, wounded, and missing blurred, until only the most dramatic version remained. No wartime source or post-war official history has ever confirmed the 94% fatality claim. The legend persists because it fits the horror of the job and the chaos of the battlefield, but its digital origins and shifting definitions make it a classic case of a meme outpacing the evidence. Japanese defenders quickly learned that the man with the flamethrower threatened their entire position. Survivors from both sides recall how crews inside bunkers were told, sometimes by word of mouth, sometimes by example, to target the man carrying the tanks first. The distinctive outline of the M2, the roar of pressurized fuel, and the flash of fire made these operators stand out against the black sand. It was common for every rifle and machine gun in a sector to open up the moment a flamethrower appeared. As one captured Japanese bunker leader later explained, "We were told, shoot the flame man first. His weapon could cook us alive." On February 23rd, near the slopes of Kuribayashi, Hershel Woody Williams and his team faced exactly this reality. Williams advanced again and again, crawling forward with a fresh tank each time his fuel ran out. His covering riflemen were cut down one by one, but their sacrifice bought him the seconds he needed to press the attack. Williams destroyed multiple pillboxes and survived the day, but he later said, "The flamethrower made you a target every time you stood up." His story shows that survival depended on cover, timing, and luck, rarely on the weapon alone. The arrival of armored flamethrower Shermans, known as Zippos, changed the equation. These tanks could project a stream of fire 150 yards, far beyond the reach of a man on foot. 8 Zippos supported the Marines, rolling up to bunkers that had pinned down entire companies. Tank armor shielded their crews from small arms, and their flame could clear a position in seconds. As more assaults waited for tank support, the number of foot operators exposed to direct fire began to fall. Captain Frank Caldwell of the 26th Marines later wrote, "The flame tank, more than any other supporting arm, won this battle." Records from the Battle of Iwo Jima show flamethrower and demolition teams faced casualty rates between 70 and 92%. Staggering, but not the viral 94% killed in action figure. After-action reports, chemical warfare service data, and unit histories confirm the danger. Operators carried 70-pound tanks, exposed themselves at close range, and were marked as top targets by Japanese command orders. Despite these risks, some Marines, like Hershel Williams, survived multiple missions, directly challenging the myth that almost none made it out. However, gaps remain. Not all unit rosters are complete, and some records are lost or remain classified. Today, historians agree the true cost was extreme, but they caution against unverified statistics. The lessons of Iwo Jima's bunker war shaped modern assault tactics and underscore the human price of close-quarters combat. The facts show the sacrifice was immense, deserving careful remembrance, not exaggeration.